The first thing I noticed was the music, not the alarms, not the violent shaking of the hull, not even the smell of burning insulation and melted steel filling the bridge. Music. Some old Earth jazz song crackled through the broken speakers above my command console while my patrol ship died around me. Slow trumpet. Piano. Soft static between notes. I remember staring at the ceiling, half convinced I was hallucinating from oxygen loss. Captain, shields are gone. That was Lieutenant Mercer screaming somewhere behind me. Then another impact hit us. The entire deck lurched sideways hard enough to throw 2 officers into the navigation pit. Sparks burst from the walls in white showers. The front observation glass fractured across the center like spiderweb ice, and beyond it I saw the silver warships of the Ether Dominion drifting toward us through the dark. Silent. Calm. Like predators that already knew the hunt was over. I gripped the edge of the console with both hands and tried to stabilize my breathing. 6 years in deep patrol sectors, and this was how it ended. Not in some heroic battle. Not defending Earth. Just another forgotten border assignment near Orion Reach where nobody important ever looked twice. Maybe that was fitting. I had spent the last 6 years making sure nobody looked too closely at me anyway. Engine core breach in 60 seconds. Someone was crying near the communications station. Someone else was praying. And over all of it, somehow, that damn jazz song kept playing. I reached into my jacket without thinking. My fingers closed around the old subway ticket folded inside the inner pocket. The edges were soft from years of handling. Faded blueprint. Station 14. Eastline Transit. Emma had touched it last. That was the only reason I still carried it. Not because it mattered. Not because it was useful. Because 6 years ago, when the bombing happened, they found it in her coat pocket after the fire crews finished clearing the station tunnels. I had asked for it afterward. I never told anyone why. Another explosion ripped through the lower decks. The ship lights died completely. For one strange second, the only illumination came from the stars outside and the soft orange glow of the emergency strips along the floor. The jazz music skipped, then resumed. I laughed once under my breath. Of course. The universe had a sense of humor after all. The front hull finally gave way with a sound like metal screaming underwater. Air tore through the bridge. Loose equipment vanished into vacuum instantly. Mercer disappeared with it. 1 second there. The next gone. I barely managed to lock my arm through the command rail before the decompression slammed me against the console hard enough to crack 2 ribs. Then the Dominion boarding lights appeared. Tall silver figures moved through the smoke as if the chaos around them did not exist. Smooth armor. Pale glowing eyes. Long movements that looked almost graceful. Ether soldiers. One of them grabbed me by the front of my ruined uniform and pulled me upright effortlessly. I tried reaching for my sidearm. My arm barely worked. The soldier glanced down at me with mild curiosity more than hatred. Then another figure entered behind them, and the entire boarding team immediately stepped aside. She was taller than the others. Not armored. Wrapped instead in dark silver robes that reflected the burning bridge lights like liquid metal. Her face was calm, cold, beautiful in a way that did not feel human at all. I knew who she was instantly. Empress Celine. I had seen her face in military briefings for years. The immortal ruler of the Ether Dominion standing in the middle of my collapsing ship while old jazz music played through broken speakers. Her eyes moved across the wreckage, then stopped on me. More specifically, on the bloodstained subway ticket hanging half out of my jacket pocket. One of the soldiers raised a weapon toward my head. Standard execution protocol. Celine lifted one hand slightly. The soldier froze. For several seconds, she simply stared at the ticket. Not at me. At the ticket. Like she recognized something in it. Or maybe recognized something in me. Then she spoke for the first time. Take him alive. That was all. No explanation. No emotion. But every soldier obeyed instantly. As darkness started closing over my vision, I remember hearing the jazz melody one last time through the ruined bridge speakers. Soft trumpet. Static. Then nothing at all. I expected chains. That was the first thing I thought when I woke up. Chains. A metal floor. A military interrogation room. Maybe a surgical table if the Dominion decided to skip the formalities. Instead, I woke beneath an ocean. At least that was what it looked like. Blue light moved slowly across the ceiling above me like sunlight passing through deep water. Shadows drifted over black crystal walls covered in living silver vines that pulsed faintly as if they were breathing. Somewhere nearby, water trickled softly through hidden channels. For several seconds, I simply stared upward, convinced I was dead. Then my ribs reminded me otherwise. Pain hit the moment I tried sitting up. Easy. The voice came from beside me. I turned sharply. A young ether woman sat near the far wall beside a curved window. She wore pale gray robes instead of armor, and unlike the soldiers from the ship, there was something strangely gentle about her face. Her silver eyes watched me carefully. "You fractured 3 ribs," she said calmly. "Also your left shoulder." I looked around quickly. No restraints. No guards. No weapons pointed at me. That worried me more than chains would have. Where am I? The Imperial residence in Lysara. I frowned. The capital? Yes. That made no sense. Nobody brought enemy officers to the capital unless they were politically useful or already dead. I swung my legs off the bed anyway. The floor beneath my feet was warm black stone threaded with glowing blue lines. Through the massive curved window beyond the room, I could see an entire city suspended above an endless artificial ocean. Towers of dark crystal rose into a pale violet sky, while silver transport platforms drifted silently between them. The whole place looked less built and more grown. Beautiful in a way that made me uncomfortable. The woman stood slowly. "My name is Mira," she said. "The Empress asked me to attend to you." "Why?" I was not told. That answer came too quickly. I looked down at myself. My uniform was gone. Someone had replaced it with simple dark clothing that fit almost perfectly. I checked my jacket instinctively. The subway ticket was still there, folded carefully inside the inner pocket. Relief hit me so hard I almost hated myself for it. Mira noticed. Her eyes lingered on the pocket for half a second. Then the door behind her opened. The room went silent immediately. Celine entered without guards. No dramatic announcement. No ceremony. Just quiet footsteps across black stone. Up close, she looked even taller than she had aboard my ship. The dark silver fabric wrapped around her moved almost like liquid under the room's blue light. Her face remained calm, unreadable, but her eyes immediately found the pocket inside my jacket. Not me. The ticket. Again. "I am told your injuries are healing," she said. Her voice was low and smooth, almost mechanical in its control. I stood anyway despite the pain. "You destroyed my ship." "Yes." "You killed my crew." A pause. "Yes." No apology. No anger either. Just fact. I clenched my jaw. "So why am I alive?" Celine walked past me toward the massive window overlooking the floating city. For a moment, she simply stared outside. Then she asked quietly, "Why do you carry it?" I blinked. "What?" "The paper inside your jacket." I stared at her. Out of everything she could have asked. Fleet routes. Earth defenses. Command codes. She wanted to know about a subway ticket. "It's nothing. You kept it through 6 years of military service." Her eyes shifted toward me slightly. "It is not nothing." I looked away first. "That's not your business." "No," she agreed softly. "But I would like it to be." Silence settled heavily between us. Somewhere beyond the walls of the palace, distant music drifted faintly through the air. Not military music. Something slower. Almost sad. Celine finally turned toward me fully. "When my soldiers found you," she said, "your ship was collapsing. Most beings protect weapons or data in moments like that. You protected this." I said nothing. Her gaze sharpened slightly. A worthless object connected to someone no longer alive. Something cold moved through my chest. "Careful." She tilted her head slightly. "That woman mattered to you." I felt anger rise instantly. "You don't get to talk about her." For the first time, something changed in Celine's expression. Not offense. Curiosity. Almost confusion. "You would rather die than explain." "That depends who's asking." Another silence. Then unexpectedly, Celine stepped closer. Close enough now that I could smell something faint and metallic beneath the scent of rain carried by the palace air. "My species," she said quietly, "does not preserve objects connected to the dead." I laughed once bitterly. "Congratulations." Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. "But humans do." "That surprises you." "Yes." The honesty of it caught me off guard. No mockery. No manipulation. Just genuine confusion. She looked toward the pocket again. What was her name? I should not have answered. Every instinct I had told me to stay silent. This was still the enemy. Still the ruler of the Dominion. Still the woman responsible for destroying everything I had left. But exhaustion makes people weak. And grief makes them stupid. "Emma," I said finally. The name felt heavier spoken out loud. Celine repeated it carefully. Emma. Like she was testing how the word felt. She died 6 years ago? Yes. And still you carry this. I nodded once. Her eyes moved toward the city beyond the window. For the first time since meeting her, she looked almost distracted. Then quietly, I would like you to tell me about her. I stared at her in disbelief. You brought me across half the galaxy for a conversation? No. She looked back at me. I brought you because when I saw that object in your hand, her voice slowed slightly. I realized there was something inside humans my empire does not understand. I folded my arms painfully across my chest. And what if I refuse? Celine studied me for several long seconds. Then she said something I never expected to hear from an immortal empress. Then I will ask again tomorrow. The third night I spent in Lasara, I stopped pretending I was waiting for escape. There were no bars on the windows. No guards outside my chamber. No locked doors. And somehow that disturbed me more than imprisonment would have. I stood alone beside the curved balcony overlooking the artificial ocean beneath the city while silver rain drifted slowly through the air. The rain here never fell properly. It floated downward almost lazily, as if gravity itself moved softer inside the Dominion capital. Behind me, the door slid open. You are awake later than usual, Celine said. I glanced toward the clock embedded into the wall crystal. I stopped sleeping properly about 6 years ago. She stepped into the room quietly. Always quietly. I had never once heard her footsteps approach before seeing her. Tonight she wore dark blue instead of silver. The color made her pale skin seem almost luminous beneath the soft lights of the chamber. In one hand, she carried a small black object. A box. You requested another conversation, I said. I did. And if I say no, you will still say something eventually. There was no arrogance in the statement. Just certainty. Celine crossed the room and placed the box carefully onto the table between us. Then she opened it. Inside lay dozens of objects. Paper photographs. Handwritten letters. Small carved figures. A dried flower sealed inside glass. A child's drawing done in uneven blue ink. I stared at the collection silently. What is this? Her expression remained calm. Forbidden items. I looked up slowly. Now that surprised me. You collect contraband? I collect questions. She picked up one of the letters carefully. The paper looked ancient. My people erased emotional attachment generations ago, she said. Not gradually. Deliberately. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? Celine looked toward the rain beyond the balcony. It means our scientists believed suffering came from devotion, grief, obsession, love. They believed civilization could become stronger without them. Her fingers moved slowly across the old paper. So they removed the capacity for emotional bonding through genetic refinement. The way she said it sounded almost clinical. Practiced. Like she had repeated the explanation many times before. Our wars ended. She continued quietly. Crime nearly vanished. Productivity increased. Rational governance replaced emotional instability. And, for the first time since meeting her, Celine hesitated. Just slightly. And over centuries, her eyes lowered toward the objects in the box. Everything else began disappearing too. I stayed silent. The art stagnated first, she said. Music became mathematically perfect, but emotionally repetitive. Literature lost individuality. Birth rates declined. Partnerships became temporary arrangements for reproduction and status efficiency. She lifted her gaze toward me again. No one mourned this loss because no one remembered what had been lost. Something cold moved through my chest. I thought about Earth. About Emma singing badly in our apartment kitchen while making coffee. About old couples arguing in grocery stores. About people writing songs after heartbreak because they did not know what else to do with the pain. Messy. Human. Alive. And you? I asked carefully. Celine looked down at the objects again. I remembered enough to become curious. The rain outside thickened softly against the crystal balcony. For a while neither of us spoke. Then she picked up a small audio device from the box. I found this on a trade moon 73 years ago, she said. A recording left by a dying pilot from the Kepri systems. She pressed a button. Static filled the room. Then a woman's voice began singing softly in a language I did not understand. The recording quality was terrible, distorted, broken, and somehow painfully intimate. Celine watched my reaction carefully. Why preserve this? She asked quietly. The singer is dead. The recording serves no strategic purpose. Yet someone protected it for decades. I leaned back slowly. Because feelings matter to us. That answer is incomplete. Feelings are always incomplete. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That almost made me smile. You really don't understand us. No, she admitted. But I am beginning to believe your species survives because of this defect rather than despite it. The word defect irritated me more than it should have. Love isn't a defect. From the Dominion perspective, attachment creates a rational sacrifice. I laughed softly. Yeah, that's usually the point. Celine stared at me. Actually stared. Like I had spoken another language. Then she asked the question so quietly I almost missed it. Did you love her very much? The room suddenly felt smaller. I looked toward the floating rain outside before answering. She used to fall asleep during movies and deny it afterward. Celine blinked once. That is not an answer. It is for humans. I rubbed my hands together slowly. She hated deep space. Thought it looked lonely. She talked too much in elevators. She stole fries off my plate every single time we ate anywhere, even when she ordered her own. My throat tightened unexpectedly. She laughed at terrible jokes because she didn't want people feeling embarrassed. Celine remained perfectly still, listening, not interrupting. I swallowed once. The bombing happened on a Tuesday morning. We were supposed to meet after my deployment briefing. She never made it there. Silence. Only rain. Only distant city sounds far below us. Then quietly. And the ticket? I touched the pocket inside my jacket automatically. It was in her coat when they found her. Celine lowered her eyes slowly. For the first time since meeting her, something about her composure seemed unstable. Not visibly, but subtly, like cracks forming beneath ice. After a long moment, she crossed the room toward the balcony. Her back remained turned to me when she spoke again. The music from your ship, she said softly. The jazz recording. I frowned slightly. What about it? She hesitated. Then, I recovered the corrupted audio file from the wreckage. I blinked. You what? I have replayed it 53 times. That caught me completely off guard. Celine finally turned toward me again. There is something inside the melody I cannot classify, she admitted quietly. Something painful. Her voice lowered slightly. And beautiful. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I realized something strange. The immortal ruler of the Ether Dominion looked almost ashamed. Not because she had listened to the song, because she had felt something while listening to it. And for the first time since arriving in Lasara, I understood that frightened her more than any war ever could. I knew something had changed the moment the palace staff stopped looking directly at me. Before, they had treated me like a dangerous curiosity. Now they treated me like contamination. Conversations ended when I entered rooms. Transport attendants avoided touching objects after I used them. Even the air inside the palace felt tighter somehow, as if the entire city was quietly holding its breath. And at the center of it all, Celine kept asking questions. Not military ones. Human ones. How long does grief remain? Why do humans continue loving people who cannot return? Why preserve suffering voluntarily? Some nights we spoke for hours beside the ocean balconies of Lasara, while silver storms drifted across the artificial sky. Other nights, she simply sat silently listening to old Earth music while I drank bitter black coffee imported at ridiculous expense from human trade sectors. The jazz recording from my ship played often now. Too often. I caught palace attendants reacting strangely whenever it echoed through the halls. Like they feared it. Maybe they did. One evening, I found Celine standing alone inside a vast chamber lined with holographic stars. The room was dark except for floating projections of entire galaxies turning slowly around us. She did not turn when I entered. You were followed today, she said quietly. I leaned against the doorway. I figured. The council has begun observing you directly. That sounds healthy. It is not. There was tension in her voice tonight. Actual tension. I walked farther into the chamber. So what exactly am I now? I asked. A political problem? Scientific curiosity? Celine finally looked toward me. You are evidence. That answer unsettled me more than I expected. Evidence of what? Her eyes held mine steadily. That emotional attachment may not weaken intelligent life. I laughed once softly. You needed me to prove that? You needed 6 years to survive your grief. That shut me up. Celine moved toward one of the star projections slowly. The council believes your presence is destabilizing me. Are they wrong? For several seconds, she said nothing. Then quietly, no. Something about hearing her admit it sent a strange heaviness through my chest. Before I could answer, the chamber doors opened sharply. 3 figures entered. Older ether officials, all wearing white ceremonial robes marked with silver geometric patterns across the chest. Scientists, their eyes immediately fixed on me. Cold. Clinical. One of them stepped forward. Human Ryan Hale. I already disliked his voice. We require the object recovered from your possession during capture. My hand moved instinctively toward the subway ticket inside my jacket. No. The scientist ignored me entirely and addressed Celine instead. The council has authorized neuroemotional examination. Celine's expression hardened slightly. You were not authorized to enter my private observatory. The matter has exceeded personal jurisdiction. The scientist's gaze shifted back toward me. Our analysis detected unusual particulate residue embedded within the object. I frowned. What residue? The scientist activated a holographic screen between us. Microscopic scans rotated in the air. Radiation markers. Chemical structures. Energy signatures. None of it meant much to me until he spoke again. The subway bombing on Earth 6 years ago involved modified resonance particles. A cold feeling moved through my stomach. These same particles originate from classified ether experimental energy systems. The room went completely silent. I stared at him. No one moved. No one breathed. What are you saying? I asked quietly. The scientist folded his hands behind his back. I am saying the explosive technology used during the Earth attack was not entirely human in origin. I felt my pulse suddenly hammering against my ribs. No. Celine looked genuinely unsettled now. The scientist continued calmly. Several members of the Dominion Defense Directorate illegally sold prototype weapons technology through black market intermediaries approximately 7 years ago. The holographic image shifted. A microscopic match percentage appeared. 99, 87%. My vision blurred slightly. Emma, the station, the smoke, the bodies, the ticket in my hand afterward. All of it suddenly connected to this room. To them. To her empire. You're lying, I said. But even I heard how weak it sounded. The scientist remained emotionless. The evidence is conclusive. I turned toward Celine. She looked pale. Not physically. Something deeper than that. Like the foundation beneath her entire world had shifted. You knew? I asked. Her answer came immediately. No. And for some reason, I believed her. The scientist stepped closer. This discovery further justifies immediate neurological extraction and emotional mapping of the human subject. Subject. Not person. Subject. Something inside me hardened instantly. No. The scientist barely acknowledged me. The emotional instability spreading through the palace has already become measurable. Several attendants display elevated attachment behaviors after prolonged exposure. Celine's voice cut through the chamber sharply. Enough. The room froze. For the first time since meeting her, I heard actual anger beneath her control. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances. Celine stepped between them and me slowly. You will leave. The council. I did not ask for council opinion. The lead scientist straightened slightly. Your Majesty, with respect, this human represents a biological contagion vector capable of destabilizing Dominion's social architecture. I almost laughed at that. Contagion vector. That was one way to describe grief, I guessed. Celine's hands tightened slightly at her sides. Then her eyes shifted toward the subway ticket still clutched in my hand. And something inside her expression broke. Just for a second. Enough for me to see it. Guilt. Real guilt. Not political concern. Not imperial embarrassment. Personal guilt. My empire helped create the weapon that killed her, she said quietly. No one answered. I looked at the ticket. At the faded blueprint nearly worn away by 6 years of handling. At the tiny burn mark near one corner from the explosion. And suddenly, unexpectedly, the rage I should have felt never came. Only exhaustion. Deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. I sat down slowly against the edge of the star projection platform. One hand over my eyes. The room remained silent around me. After a while, Celine dismissed the scientists without even looking at them. The doors closed behind them. Then there was only us. The stars turned slowly overhead. I heard her approach carefully. Ryan. I lowered my hand. She stood a few feet away now. Uncertain. The immortal empress of the Ether Dominion looked uncertain. I did not know, she said again quietly. I know. That surprised her. You believe me? I laughed weakly. You looked horrified. Her voice dropped lower. My people taught themselves to remove pain. She looked toward the stars above us. And yet somehow we still created suffering anyway. Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. Finally, Celine asked the question almost in a whisper. Do you hate me? I thought about it honestly. About Emma. About the station fire. About 6 years of carrying grief through empty sectors of space. And strangely, about Celine sitting alone replaying old jazz music because she could not understand why sadness made her chest hurt. Hatred suddenly felt small compared to all of it. I think, I said slowly, there's already been enough emptiness in this universe. Celine stared at me. Then something happened I never thought possible. The Empress of the Ether Dominion began to cry. Silently. No dramatic breakdown. No collapse. Just silver tears sliding slowly down the face of the most powerful woman in the galaxy, while artificial stars drifted above us in the dark. The attack happened 3 days after Celine cried in front of me. Nobody spoke about it afterward. Not directly. But the atmosphere inside Lasara changed overnight. Security drones tripled across the palace sectors. Entire wings of the Imperial residence were sealed behind shimmering energy barriers. Council representatives stopped requesting audiences and started issuing demands instead. And everywhere I went, people stared. Not at her. At me. The human. The infection. I stood alone inside the Eastern Garden Pavilion the morning everything finally broke apart. Artificial sunlight spilled through the enormous glass arches overhead, while silver water moved quietly through narrow stone canals beneath the walkways. Strange white trees curved upward toward the transparent ceiling, their branches glowing faintly blue at the edges. Beautiful place to die, honestly. I leaned against the railing carefully. My ribs still hurt whenever I breathed too deeply. Behind me, soft footsteps approached. You should not be standing yet. I glanced sideways. Celine. No guards again. That was becoming dangerous. You should probably stop sneaking up on military officers, I muttered. You hear everyone else. Everyone else stomps. That almost earned a smile from her. Almost. She stepped beside me, overlooking the lower gardens below us, where hundreds of Ether citizens moved through the morning pathways beneath floating banners of silver and blue. There will be a public ceremony today, she said quietly. That sounds ominous. The council requested a demonstration of imperial stability. Which means? It means they believe I am losing control. I looked toward her. And are you? For several seconds, she watched the crowds below before answering. Yes. The honesty still caught me off guard every time. A distant sound interrupted us then. Music. Soft at first. Barely audible. My chest tightened immediately. Jazz. The old recording from my destroyed ship drifted faintly through the garden's speakers hidden among the crystal walls. Celine noticed my expression. I did not activate it, she said. Then who did? Neither of us answered. The melody echoed strangely through the glass structures around us. Trumpet. Piano. Static between notes. I suddenly realized people across the gardens had stopped moving. Listening. Watching us. A chill moved slowly down my spine. This is a setup, I said quietly. Celine turned sharply toward the surrounding walkways. Too late. The glass ceiling above us exploded inward. Everything happened at once after that. Shattered crystal rained through the pavilion in massive glittering waves. Citizens screamed below. Security drones activated instantly, flooding the gardens with red warning light. 3 dark figures dropped from the broken ceiling structures directly toward us. Assassins. Not soldiers. These moved differently. Fast. Silent. Professional. The first one landed 20 feet away, already holding a curved plasma blade glowing white-hot at the edge. Celine stepped in front of me instinctively. Stay behind me. Absolutely not. The assassin lunged. Celine reacted instantly, catching the attacker's wrist with terrifying speed and twisting hard enough to shatter bone. The plasma blade spun across the pavilion floor in a shower of sparks. Then the second attacker appeared behind her. I didn't think. Didn't calculate. Didn't hesitate. I just moved. Pain exploded through my ribs as I slammed into Celine hard enough to throw both of us sideways across the stone floor. The plasma strike missed her head by inches, close enough that I felt the heat burn across the side of my neck. The assassin turned toward us immediately. I scrambled for the fallen weapon. My injured shoulder nearly gave out. The attacker was faster. Celine shoved me backward. Ryan. The assassin raised another blade. And suddenly the entire pavilion filled with music. Loud. Distorted. The jazz recording blasted through every emergency speaker in the garden system simultaneously. The assassins hesitated for half a second. Just enough. I grabbed the fallen plasma weapon and drove it upward blindly as the nearest attacker lunged again. The blade punched through dark armor with a burst of white sparks. The attacker collapsed against me heavily. The smell of burning metal flooded the pavilion. I stared down at the body in shock. I hadn't killed someone up close in years. The third assassin moved toward Celine through the flashing emergency lights. She had no weapon now, only her bare hands. The attacker raised a long silver spike aimed directly at her chest, and something inside me broke loose completely. I remember Emma laughing in our apartment kitchen. I remember the subway smoke. I remember Celine crying beneath artificial stars. And over all of it, that damn jazz song. Still playing. Still alive somehow. I moved before thinking. I hit the assassin from the side hard enough to drive both of us through one of the crystal railings overlooking the lower canal levels. We crashed into shallow silver water below. Pain detonated through my ribs. The assassin recovered faster than me. Of course they did. The silver spike flashed downward toward my throat, then stopped suddenly. Celine stood behind the attacker now. One pale hand wrapped around their neck with terrifying calm. There was a sharp crack. The body collapsed instantly. Silence followed. Only the jazz melody remained drifting softly through damaged speakers above us. Emergency drones swarmed the gardens overhead. Citizens fled in every direction. And in the middle of all the chaos, Celine dropped to her knees beside me. Ryan. I tried answering. Blood filled my mouth instead. Great sign. Her hands moved across my chest searching for wounds. When she saw the blood spreading through my shirt, something in her face changed completely. Fear. Raw. Uncontrolled. Stay awake. That's usually the plan. I coughed. Do not joke right now. I looked up at the shattered glass ceiling overhead. Silver rain drifted slowly through the opening while the old jazz melody echoed around the ruined pavilion. You know, I muttered weakly. Your empire has really terrible hospitality. Celine ignored that entirely. Her hands were trembling now. Actually trembling. The immortal ruler of the Dominion looked more terrified than I felt. That realization hit harder than the wound itself. Around us, guards finally arrived in full force. Weapons raised. Drones scanning. Too late, obviously. Celine never looked away from me. Not once. And while the jazz song continued playing through broken speakers above the gardens, I saw understanding finally settle fully into her expression. Not intellectual understanding. Not curiosity. Something deeper. Humans carried memories because love did not end neatly. It stayed. It scarred. It bled into everything afterward. And somewhere between the subway ticket, the music, and the moment I threw myself between her and a blade, Celine had stopped studying that truth. She had started feeling it. I woke to the sound of the jazz recording again. Soft trumpet. Static. Piano somewhere underneath. For one confused second, I thought I was back on my ship dying beside the command console. Then pain hit my ribs and ruined the illusion. I opened my eyes slowly. Dark ceiling. Silver lights. The Imperial Medical Wing. Of course. A transparent medical screen floated beside the bed, tracking my pulse in glowing blue lines. My chest was wrapped tightly beneath fresh regeneration mesh, and my left arm felt half numb from pain suppressors. I turned my head carefully. Celine sat beside the window. Still. Silent. She had not changed clothes. The dark silver fabric she wore in the gardens was stained near one sleeve with my blood. The sight of that unsettled me more than the injury itself. You look terrible, I muttered weakly. Without looking at me, she answered. You nearly died. Yeah, I noticed. Only then did she turn. There were dark shadows beneath her eyes now. I had never seen that before. Ether biology apparently did not erase exhaustion completely. How long? I asked. 31 hours. I blinked slowly. You stayed here the whole time? Yes. Why? That finally made something flicker across her expression. Not anger. Almost disbelief. You protected me. That doesn't answer the question. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, I did not wish to leave. Something tightened painfully in my chest that had nothing to do with broken ribs. I looked away first. Dangerous. Very dangerous. The door behind her opened suddenly. 3 palace guards entered alongside one of the white-robed council scientists from before. The same one. I immediately disliked his face again. The council has convened, he announced coldly. Celine did not stand. Then they may continue without me. The attack in the gardens has accelerated political instability across the Dominion. Strange, she said calmly. Assassination attempts often do. The scientist ignored the sarcasm. Several houses now openly accuse the seventh throne of emotional corruption. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. Emotional corruption still sounded ridiculous. The scientist continued. They demand the human be surrendered immediately for neurological extraction and containment. Celine's expression became completely unreadable. No. The scientist stiffened slightly. Your Majesty. No. The single word cut through the room like cold metal. Even the guards looked uncomfortable now. The council believes your judgment compromised, the scientist pressed carefully. The human has already altered palace behavioral patterns. Music circulation has increased across public sectors by 17% since his arrival. Civilian emotional activity markers continue rising. I looked toward Celine. She turned your people emotional with jazz music. Impressive. Nobody appreciated the joke. The scientist activated a holographic display above the room. Crowds filled the projection. Massive gatherings across different Dominion worlds. People holding glowing symbols. Playing instruments openly in public squares. Others arguing violently with security forces. I frowned. What am I looking at? Celine answered quietly. Change. The scientist's face hardened. You are looking at societal fracture. The hologram shifted again. Now the screen showed citizens replaying footage from the garden attack. More specifically, footage of me shielding Celine from the assassins. The jazz recording echoed faintly even through the projection audio. The transmission spread uncontrollably, the scientist said bitterly. Millions witnessed the human risking his life for the empress. I leaned back carefully. That's your crisis? You acted irrationally, he snapped. Yeah, humans do that sometimes. The scientist turned sharply toward Celine. This is precisely the contamination we warned against. Attachment creates instability. Sacrifice destroys hierarchy. Celine finally stood. Slowly, gracefully, terrifyingly calm. No, she said quietly. Attachment creates meaning. The room went dead silent. Even the guards looked shocked. The scientist stared at her in open disbelief. You cannot truly believe that. Celine stepped closer to the hologram crowds floating above the room. For 1,000 years, she said softly, our empire has survived without grief, without devotion, without love. Her eyes moved toward the civilians gathered in the projection, and slowly we stopped creating anything worth surviving for. The scientist's voice lowered carefully. You are speaking treason against the Dominion founding order. I am speaking truth. Then she looked directly at me. And something passed between us in that moment that frightened me more than the assassins had. Because I finally understood what was happening. This was no longer curiosity. No longer fascination. Celine was emotionally attached to me. The realization landed heavily between my ribs. I thought about Emma instantly. Her laugh. Her subway ticket. The promise I silently made beside her grave 6 years earlier that there would never be anyone else. And now, this impossible woman stood in front of an empire ready to tear itself apart, because somewhere along the way she had started caring whether I lived or died. The scientist interrupted my thoughts coldly. The council issues final demand. The human must be surrendered by dawn. Celine did not even blink. No. Then the council will formally remove the seventh throne from imperial authority. One of the guards shifted nervously. Everyone in the room understood what that meant. Civil conflict. Possibly war. The scientist lowered his voice further. You would fracture the Dominion over one human. Celine answered immediately. No. Then she walked toward my bedside slowly, took my hand gently in front of everyone, and said, I would fracture it over the lie we built it upon. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Her fingers tightened slightly around mine. Warm. Steady. Real. The scientist looked genuinely horrified now. You cannot publicly declare attachment. Celine's eyes never left mine. Watch me. The scientist finally turned and stormed from the room alongside the guards. The doors sealed shut behind them. Silence settled heavily afterward. I stared down at our joined hands. Then up at her. This is insane. Yes, Celine agreed softly. You're talking about civil collapse. Yes. You barely even know me. Something almost painfully vulnerable flickered through her expression then. I know you carried love through 6 years of grief instead of becoming empty. Her voice lowered slightly. I know you protected me when logic demanded self-preservation. She glanced briefly toward the city lights outside the window. And I know that when I believed myself monstrous for what my empire caused your world. Her eyes returned to mine carefully. You chose mercy instead of hatred. I swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt too small. Dangerously small. Celine. She moved closer beside the bed. I listened to that jazz recording again while you were unconscious, she admitted quietly. I almost laughed. Of course you did. There is a section near the ending where the trumpet falters slightly before recovering. I blinked. You noticed that? I notice everything about it. Her voice softened further. Because now when I hear it, she hesitated carefully. I think of you. That hit harder than it should have. Much harder. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then very gently, almost uncertainly, Celine touched her forehead against mine. An ether gesture. Ancient. Intimate. And in that moment, with the distant jazz melody drifting quietly through the medical wing speakers somewhere far outside the room, I realized I was no longer grieving alone. The day Celine stood before the Dominion Council, the entire empire stopped breathing. Every screen across Lasara carried the transmission live. Factories paused production. Trade routes went silent. Even orbital traffic slowed as billions watched the skybridge above the capital ocean where the Empress of the Ether Dominion prepared to either save her empire or break it forever. I stood beside her wearing plain black formal clothing borrowed from palace archives. My ribs still hurt beneath the regeneration mesh, but I stayed upright anyway. Below us, endless crowds filled the lower platforms of the city. Silver faces. Silent faces. Watching. The 6 ruling counselors stood opposite us beneath towering crystal pillars shaped like frozen waves. Their ceremonial robes moved softly in the ocean wind drifting through the open bridge. And somewhere hidden beneath all the silence, the jazz melody played again, very quietly through the city speakers. Celine heard it too. I saw the smallest movement in her expression. Then the eldest counselor stepped forward. 7th Empress Celine, he announced coldly. You stand accused of emotional contamination, political destabilization, and violation of Dominion genetic law. Celine's hand brushed lightly against mine. Not for appearance, for reassurance. I know, she answered calmly. The counselor's pale eyes shifted toward me with visible disgust. The human must be surrendered immediately. No. The word echoed across the entire bridge. Across the city. Across the empire. The counselor's voice sharpened. You would risk civil fracture over one insignificant human. Celine finally stepped forward fully into the center of the bridge. And for the first time since I met her, she stopped sounding like an empress. She sounded like a woman. For 1,000 years, she said, her voice carrying across the silent city, we removed grief from our people. We removed attachment. We removed love. The ocean winds moved gently through her silver robes. And in doing so, we removed wonder. Music, meaning, devotion. We survived. Her eyes lowered briefly toward the crowds below. But we did not live. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. The entire Dominion listened. Celine turned toward me then. Not toward the council. Toward me. This human carried the memory of one woman through 6 years of pain without allowing that pain to make him cruel. Her voice softened slightly. He showed me that grief is not weakness. She looked directly into my eyes now. It is proof that something beautiful mattered enough to leave a wound. My chest tightened painfully. The counselor stepped forward furiously. You speak emotional madness. No, Celine answered quietly. I speak truth. Then, in front of billions of witnesses, she took my hand openly. Gasps moved through the bridge crowd below like a physical wave. The counselors looked horrified. Celine never looked away from me. The Dominion calls this contamination, she said softly. I call it awakening. And before the entire empire. She kissed me. Not carefully. Not politically. Not as performance. A real kiss. Warm. Certain. Human in all the ways her people once believed impossible. The city below erupted instantly. Some screamed in outrage. Others cried openly. And somewhere far beneath the chaos, The old jazz recording rose louder through the speakers of Lysara. Trumpet, static, piano, the same broken melody that had followed us from a dying ship to the center of an empire. Celine rested her forehead gently against mine afterward. An old ether gesture. Now ours. I think, she whispered softly. I finally understand why humans keep fragile things. I smiled weakly. Yeah. Her silver eyes shimmered slightly beneath the city lights. Because losing them changes the shape of your soul forever. For a moment I thought about Emma. About the subway ticket now resting inside the memorial gardens below the palace instead of hidden inside my jacket. Not forgotten. Never replaced. Just finally no longer carried alone. I touched Celine's hand gently. And somewhere inside me, after 6 long years of grief and silence and drifting through empty stars, something healed. Below us, across the changing dominion, new music began spreading through the city for the very first time in generations. And this time, Celine smiled when she heard it.